Because no, it's the strangest thing. We've known each other for 4 years or so now, and I had never heard that story. A, but B, like the way that call it what you want. I'm not really all that apt to call it God, but fate, whatever, intervening in things, and one thing just going a hair's breadth to the
Mhm.
left or right,
Yeah.
and everything is different. It's just so fascinating to me.
So I liked doing the criminal investigation stuff. The firm in Maryland was more insurance stuff. So it was a firm that did a lot of, workers' comp and injury liability insurance stuff. We worked for insurance companies. So there was a whole group of investigators that would, go out in the windowless vans and, take pictures of people with allegedly debilitating back injuries doing somersaults on their trampolines in the backyard. And, then they'd go in front of the commission and show the videos, things like that. My job was, I would go out with them every once in a while. My job was part office manager, part background investigator. I spent a lot of time in courthouses, just kind of generating reports, digging into people. This was in the early days of LexisNexis and Westlaw and some of that, where we could pull reports that had driver's licenses and addresses and things like that, and so there was still a lot of kind of pavement work to do with that, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed doing that job. And when I left that job, it was sad, but I couldn't find anything like that when we moved back to Seattle. At that point, I was with the woman who's now my wife, and we were moving back to Seattle. She'd moved out to Pittsburgh for a job that turned out to be way too good to be true. In the interim, after she moved out, I moved up to Pittsburgh from Baltimore because things were kind of going sideways. Things went further sideways and completely pear shaped. So we just pulled up stakes and just moved back to Seattle. Just went back to the West Coast from there.
Well,
But out in Seattle, I couldn't find a firm, and that's kind of why, like, I needed a business to work for. And out there, it was mostly sole proprietors. It's just people working out of the garage and things like that. And I'm not that kind of guy. Tried to get on with a couple of security things at like Boeing and Nordstrom and things like that, and that never really worked out. I got as far as I passed the physical exam, and I'd gotten into the orals for the Washington State Police, and that flamed out in the most magnificent way. And if you bring me back on the podcast, we can save that story for then.
oh, come on.
But that was pretty much the end of my, okay, all right, maybe law enforcement just really isn't my gig. And at that
Yeah,
point, I'd already fallen into real estate, and that kind of held me on for a little while until I fell into comic book conventions. I tend to fall into a lot of things. So
well, it's fascinating to me, and I want to bring it up, so that's a perfect segue. It's almost as if you have an outline in front of you. I Up until 2009, your resume is very, so we say traditional. Business manager at a property management firm, background investigator, compliance manager, and then things flip a bit. You alluded to it, but you ran a group of 4 comic shops for like 5 years.
I did. There's a bit of an overlap here. So I have always been, like I said, I've always been a pop culture junkie. I've always been this guy. I have collected comic books since I was 14, 13 or 14. My gateway into comic books was Crisis on Infinite Earths. We had a local shop in Juneau that I had we'll call it a box. Those of you who are listening can hear the air quotes around the word box. Um, it was a manila folder inside a janky old filing cabinet. But I started collecting. I read through Crisis on Infinite Earths. The Silver Age was ending. The new age of comics was beginning. So it was easy for me to read through that and then kind of jump back in with Burns' Man of Steel and Frank Miller's Dark Knight, and kind of get into Batman, Batman Year One and stuff like that. And they were kind of rebooting everything. So I was an avid collector of comic books even way back then. So fast forward, we're back in Seattle, and this is around 2000, 2001. At this point, we moved back late '98, or no, I'm sorry, it was early '99. We moved back, and then we got married summer of '99. So this is 2000, 2001, and we're at a local strip mall, and my wife's puttering around the scrapbook store, and stereotypical male as I am at that point, I'm like, I can't be here. So I go 2 shops down to a place called the Comic Stop. Now I hadn't actively collected comics in quite some time, but I walked in there and I was interested because I'd read something somewhere that Kevin Smith was rebooting Green Arrow. And that, Oliver Queen had died and all this stuff. And Oliver Queen has always been like my favorite comic book character, hands down. Oliver Queen is my Patronus or spirit animal or whatever you want to call it. But so I was really, really interested in that. And so I go into the shop and I start up a conversation with the guy behind the counter. Guy behind the counter's name was Jim DeMonacos. Owner of the store, um, showed me to where I could find the comic book with this. At that point, I was an issue or two late. I think we were into issue 2 or 3 of whatever that run was. So I did spend a little bit of time going to other comic book stores around the area looking for issues 1 and 2, and eventually found them. But I actually liked being in the store, so I would go back to the store once a week and kind of peruse the shelves and see what was there. And when I got back into enough, I opened a box and became a regular at the shop. And Jim and I became friends. I got to know Jim's brother George. I got to know Brian, the other guy that owned the other co-owner at the store. And Jim had been talking, and at this point, I'm working in real estate. I'm a portfolio manager for a property management company. I'm running residential and commercial real estate properties. And Jim had been talking like we need to. What this place really needs is a really good convention. And that's always been Jim's way. Jim's always like, this thing needs a really good something, and then Jim goes and builds that something, and damn if he didn't build it, right? 2003, Jim starts up Emerald City Comic Con. I'm not sure how much of a convention guy I am. I don't go to the first one. I attend the second one. I think second or third, perhaps. But I'm not a collector of like I'm not into the autographs. I don't need to go through Artist Alley and get sketches. I don't need to sit in panels, right? That's not my big. I don't need to go play Magic for 5 hours. That's not my thing, right? But I am a comic book collector, and I'm getting into other collectibles. I'm getting into action figures. I'm getting into statues. I'm getting into things. DC Direct was really, really ramping up at that point. Um, so I would go and I'd spend, a good hour or two casing the show floor, making notes. Had my list. What books am I looking for? Well, I'm searching the long boxes, and that was kind of cool. And I talked to Jim about it, and so the next year they as it kept growing, they needed more volunteers. So I'm like, hey, yeah, I'll jump in. Like, it's one Saturday up at the shop, on the assembly line filling swag bags, and it's, oh, we got to pick up this guy at the airport, and we got to do this. It's all very grassroots at the time, right? It's just we weren't even in the convention center at that point. We were in a portion of the arena of the like not convention space, but the user space of Seahawks Stadium at that time.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Which was Quest. I don't even know if it was Questfield then. I think it was something else. Um, it was something that was Questfield. Now it's CenturyLink. I don't know what it is now. Um, so we were there. Yeah, the show didn't move to the convention center until I think year 5 or 6. I do remember one year there was Peter Mayhew came to the show and he was like the celebrity. Margot Kidder was there one very very early year. But those were anomalies. It was almost always writers and artists and things like that. I remember sitting in a panel with Mark Wade and a couple other people, and it was still not my thing, but I was kind of getting a feel for what was going on all around it. Fast forward to 2007, I have recently shifted from this property management company I was working for to work for Expedia, to run their global rent roll. I was tired of the rent collection and the Sturm and Drang and things of that. had found this gig with Expedia, which was fairly new. It was a global real estate compliance, basically running the rent roll, making sure everybody's rents in all the global Expedia offices were getting paid, things like that. It's a lot of paperwork, but it was a new ladder to kind of climb. Um, and I'm working the registration booth at Emerald City Comic Con that year, and this is the first year that Jim had really brought in, celebrities. Like, not the first year for celebrities, but the first year there was actually a row of autographing, right? and it was only three guests. The scheduled guests were Adam Baldwin, Laura Vandervoort, and Jamie Bamber. Laura Vandervoort had to cancel, and they brought in Julie Benz,
Huh.
um, and Adam Baldwin had to cancel, and they brought in, and I may have to I may have to Google this really quick and look it up because I forgot the name the other day too. Um, and then you can edit this little portion of the podcast if you want to. But the kid that played Boba Fett in the prequels, um,
I see his face. I don't remember his name.
yeah, I'm searching for it here, but anyway, so they had those in, and Jim comes out to the registration booth and he pulls me out. He's like, "Hey, I need you to do me a favor." I'm like, "Sure." He's like, "I need you to work with Julie Benz for the weekend," and I'm like, "Oh, well, twist my arm."
Yeah. Okay.
So we go and sit with Julie, and I'll try to tell the story as accurately as I can because I do remember retelling it to her once upon a time. Um, she was not having a good weekend. She wasn't feeling that well. She'd just come off filming, I think, Rambo at the time. She was mid Dexter still. But and there were some things going on in her personal life. Like she just it just wasn't a good weekend for her, and it wasn't that busy. Like we didn't really know what we were doing exactly. But watching things kind of happen that weekend, watching how the tables were set up and how the money was being exchanged and how the photographs were laid out and things like this, it all kind of gave us ideas. And Jim and I sat down afterwards and talked about all of this. And so the next year, I was kind of in charge of the row of things. Jim was still booking the guests. Jim was still handling the business part of it. But in terms of the operation, the on-site operations, that became my job at that point. So as the show grew, as the lineups grew, as everything just continued to grow, so did these celebrity operations. We went from we brought on an outside security group to handle escorting and things that we needed. I think at the apex pre Reed Pop, I was running a dedicated staff of about 25 with up to 100 volunteers beyond that. Running, yeah, and it was line control, it was table stuff, it was money movement, it was photo ops, it was the whole bit. Throughout all of this, and so the year after Reed Pop acquired, and I'm jumping ahead, and we can jump around here, but
Hmm.
the 2015 Emerald City Comic Con, which was the last kind of independent con we did. Reed Pop had already acquired us, but we were running out that show cycle and finishing that cycle before we kind of everything really shifted over to Relics, Reed Exhibitions. Sorry, um, some habits are going to be hard to break. Um, I invited Julie back for that show. And I caught her in the green room for a minute, and I sat down and I just walked up to her and I said, "Listen, you know, thanks for coming back. Thanks for being here again. I know last time we were here it wasn't so great. But I said, but I want to thank you specifically." And I said, "Listen, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for you being here then, I wouldn't be here now." We'd explained that the show had grown and we'd been purchased, and I'd just gotten this cool new job and all this different stuff. And it was basically like, "Julie Benz, you are my origin story." And I still have. I don't. It's not up on the wall currently, but I actually still have the foam core photo that hung in her booth that very first year. I still have that in my possession. So dialing back a little bit, 2009, we get hit with the big recession. Right, there's lots of layoffs, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, I am deemed redundant at Expedia, and left to fend for myself along with a lot of other people who work pretty mundane paperwork shuffling office jobs throughout the greater Seattle area. And I'm having trouble finding work, and I'm bored, and all this stuff. The convention is obviously still growing at that point. Jim's getting busier, George is getting busier, everything's getting busier. They're now up to 3 stores with the comic stop chain. And Jim just doesn't always have the time to be on site. So I, just to get out of the house, bartered with him that I would work, I would run his store open to close one day a week, to allow him to get out and do what he needed to do for the con. and to barter for the books in my box.